got involved in Iran in the mid-70s. And I used to fly across to Iran quite a bit. We were doing looking at getting into some precast housing operations there. Thank goodness we never won anything, because then the Shah was thrown out. But in Iran we saw an Iranian company, computers were estimating, so it was the first time we'd seen computers being used in construction outside of accounting. And it just looked like an intelligent thing to start looking at. All we had access to then were handheld devices like Texas Instruments and little Peter Reynolds calculators. And we started using these to calculate the panels that went into these precast houses. And so I would go across there and, as part of a bid and be there 3 days and come home, whereas the building estimator would stay there for 3 weeks, taking a quantity, doing all the stuff. And it was just a big message to us that if you start computerizing and having standards, you could do things so much more quickly. It encouraged us. And we bought that machine that's in our... And that was really, blind faith. Let's try. And so we spent money and did it. And Hewitt and I got stuck into that machine, and we built... we experimented quite a bit because we knew nothing about programming. And then we built Betsy, which was building estimating system. It was a very, very simple system. But worked off the principles we have in Candy now. So it worked off bill of quantities. We had a crude worksheet and resource list. And it all sprang from there. We produced Betsy, did the first bid. We started at the beginning of 1980, and the first bid went in June or July on Betsy. So that was the sort of achievement we got then. We got a lot of support from the M&R guys. Then Murray and Roberts, Murray Stewart was involved with Christiane Nielsen then. I think M&R owned the right to Christiane being a Norwegian coastal and sea construction company in the southern hemisphere. So that included Australia as well. And they wanted some change, some more... In fact, they invented the complex resources for us. And so we named the next generation CAN for Christiane Nielsen and Candy. So we had Betsy and then Candy. Yeah. And that's where it stuck. So that's really the origin of the name. It's very simple, and it became a catchy name. A lot of people criticize it, but it's something you sort of remember quite easily.
If you really think about it, CCS was very innovative. We're the first software that actually rented, as far as I know. Now everybody's getting on a bandwagon. And if you look at the naming, if you look at everybody's going to, Google, Snapchat, all that funny names to make things memorable, we already had. So we were, we were quite, innovative at the beginning.
And then, things like the rental was actually by chance. Everything came out of the Murray and Roberts yard. You rented everything, and so it seemed like the intelligent way to do it. So that's the sort of origin of the thing. And it spread around the M&R group quite strongly. There was a lot of opposition from the mainframe guys in Johannesburg, but they ultimately gave in because we had the support of the estimators and the construction teams. They would like to see, they were trying to invent systems on the mainframe. And of course the problem we always had, we couldn't connect back to the office. That was all standalone machines. But actually that's worked remarkably well, and it still is the case today, actually. So as we built up, I think we went into those little Hewlett-Packard computers, 9816s, quite early on, and I think we ended up with about 130 of them in M&R, spread around construction sites and offices. And they became the mainstay. And we rented those out. That was the base of the rental, was a piece of equipment, actually. And then the IBM PC came out, and really we were running on the wrong technology then. So somehow we had to get onto the PC, and we found another really very innovative fellow here in Cape Town, a young guy. He was only 16 years old, but he built us those boards that you've seen with the processor on, which is what the Hewlett-Packard computer used, and it connected to a PC. So it actually was a compromise between the two worlds. And it was a really nice jump, and it was very interesting actually having that sort of technology developed and doing it locally. And then, we must have had hundreds and hundreds of those boards made over time. And they got smaller and smaller as the technology got better and miniaturized, until we then finally had to move on to Windows. And that was a make or break decision, because if we not on our forecast, if we weren't on Windows in the next 2 or 3 years, we'd become redundant again and be gone. And so that was the first really big shift we made in the software. But again, we were running effectively a Hewlett-Packard inside an IBM PC, and then kept using the same facility to run the Windows system. Then ultimately, the Windows operating system pushed our boards far out of the way, and we could run native on the Windows machine. I guess that's still where we are today. We just followed along with Windows. Some of the early innovations we made really characterized the people that we had in the company. Film, for instance, if I just go back a little bit, one of the early machines that we got along the way to try was a Hewlett-Packard Mini, which had a very nice database system on it. And when we started making our own software, Willem mimicked what we had used on the Hewlett-Packard database system, and built a similar system into Candy, which still runs today. Now that's remarkable. I mean, that's run 30 odd years, and it says something for the software system that we've used, the FOSS system we've used, because we've been able to adapt to different processes, different environments quite easily and happily. And then we saw the original, the way Windows works today with Windows really comes from Rank Xerox. They invented something called the Star Machine. Rank Xerox were one of these organizations where they employed very clever people, put them in a laboratory, said, do whatever you want to do. Get on and invent something. And these guys invented what they called the Star Machine, which had the original primitive mouse, and they had windows which could be a document that could move around the screen. And when we saw that, we thought that was an excellent way to do things, because we could mimic a guy's desktop by having different pieces and piles of paper around. And we built that. Again, that was a huge innovation that we got. We probably had Windows, our form of Windows, running way before Microsoft did. And it's interesting, Microsoft actually saw Steve Jobs. They demonstrated their Windows system on one of their early Lisa machines, and Microsoft copied it. So we were typical contractors. You've got a problem, how do you solve it? Find a way to solve the problem. And hats off to the guys who've worked on this project, because they've come up with some brilliant things. Roger Bull, Willem Boerter, Hugh Delcase, Paul's been there forever also. I mean, those are the sort of basis of the entire system. And we were really free thinkers. Guys would come in, hey, what about this might be a good idea, let's try it. And so we whittled our way through different issues. And we were also very open to the users and what they want and what they understood. So once we were on Windows and could use a mouse properly, we really could open up things. And I still like the menu system that I think Ian was one of the big pushers behind our menu system, and Richard and Paul certainly have been involved in it. But to me, it's just such an obvious way of doing things. But other systems, I try clicking in a column and so on, I don't get an answer, which I find very frustrating. So that's the sort of broad beginnings of the company. I ran it on a very laissez-faire, sort of free and easy way, letting guys do what they want and try their own things, and would steer them off things that I felt weren't the right way to go. So we ran a fairly free operation, which I think in a corporate world gets quite difficult. So that's the sort of basis of where it all came from. We also had some very progressive management in Murray and Stewart and Murray Roberts, who were quite happy to try issues. I remember once my boss, Jeff Knudsen, saying, well, they had no complaints, so sure, go ahead. That was his sort of attitude to things. So that's the sort of basis of where it all came from.